I just wanted to kind of introduce a new idea here. I mean, it's probably an old idea, but also a new idea. This was years ago that I played the Ouija board a lot, and one strange evening I was playing, and I asked the question, who are we talking to when we speak to the Ouija board? And the reply was, in your future, man will be able to speak with his ancestors, contrary to popular belief that you were speaking to your ancestors, which meant basically that in our future, we're going to discover ways to talk to the past and deliver messages through the past. And in connection with the UFO experience, I was wondering if, quite possibly, that the extraterrestrial was actually us in the future, coming back, discovered the technology of traveling through time, and I was just wondering if you had anything to say about that.
Now watch how this question is perverted into an episode of speechifying on my part. I'm glad you asked that question. Well, I mean, I've thought a lot about this. I suppose in order to get into it, what I should do is just take a moment or two to actually describe for you my idea or my account of what it is that lies at the very center, or at least as far into the center as I've been able to push of these experiences. To my mind, I mentioned here this morning that DMT seems to me the most powerful of these things. What powerful means in that context is that more of the motifs are present at greater energy than they are in some of these other compounds. And, at the risk of repeating myself, what happens to most people, I think, if they are able to remember it, what an actual DMT flash is like, is, this stuff, it's vaporized in a glass pipe, it's smoked, it comes on in about half a minute or less, and is immensely stronger than any amount of psilocybin or LSD could conceivably be, I think. And what happens is, and I'll speak in the first person just to make it manageable. What happens is I break into a space. First of all, I am fully myself. In other words, I am exactly who I was before. That's why on one level I say DMT doesn't affect your mind. You are not euphoric, ecstatic. You are exactly who you were before. But there is a sense of pushing through a membrane of some sort. There's actually a sound as though someone had wadded up a cellophane bread wrapper, that crackling sound, which some people assumed erroneously were brain cells frying in your cerebellum. A friend of mine said it's your soul as radio intellect-y leaving your body through the top of your head. Well, whatever it is, you burst into a space, I burst into a space that is inhabited. That's the first shocker. There is no ambiguity about it, because there's an ear-splitting cheer as you break into this space. It's an elf nest of some sort. And there are hundreds of these self-dribbling jeweled basketballs, sort of. I mean, that's a heavy download into English of what they are. But they are autonomous, separate from the background, and they bound forward, screaming hello, basically. And for someone who expected insight into their relationship or their financial circumstances, this is a fairly a fairly astonishing and rapid turn of development, and they are intently focused upon you. I mean, when it happens to me, they yell hooray, and then they are like long lost acquaintances. They literally pour over you. They crawl over you. You're being hugged by a troop of hyperspatial machine elves. And they say, you stay away so long. You send so many, but you come so rarely. And we're so happy to see you. And there is a sense of being somehow, without being able to cognize the logic of it, you're underground. You can tell that you're far underground. And these things, the main thing going on in this place is that these things are creatures of language. They are elves of syntactical intent. They appear to be made of language, not matter. And they are in a process of continuous semantic transformation. Meaning is crawling across their surfaces in a state of continual metamorphosis. And they are emitting sounds roughly analogous to some kind of music or language, except that this is like no music or language you've ever heard, because what it is something capable of being visibly apprehended. It's sound which you can see. It's linguistic structure whose syntax is visible in three-dimensional space. And they use their voices to make objects which are, in some sense, the central focus of the experience. Because out of the air, out of their bodies, out of your body, they condense, create, and pluck these objects which they offer for your inspection. And as you lean forward to look at one of these things, amidst this clamor of elf hysteria, you, as I said, are fully yourself. Your judgment is not impaired. And in fact, they are saying to you, fight excitement. Do not abandon yourself to amazement. In other words, they're telling you, stay down. Don't just go off on some arm-waving rave about how this is impossible and outlandish and outrageous. Try to stay focused on what we're doing. And what they show you are objects that are intrinsically and inherently impossible. So that these things made of tooled gold, ivory, cut stone, flesh, music, hope, odor, I mean, it's hard to talk about, but when you direct your attention towards these things, you can tell by looking at it that if you could get it into three-dimensional space, if I could suddenly whip one out of my briefcase and display it to you, our world, our intellectual constructs would collapse upon themselves, because this is impossible, impossibly beautiful, impossibly constructed, defying of the laws of physics and of chemistry.
So is there do you think there's a multi-dimensional life force that is the same through the entire dimension, and that's a higher dimension, actually, maybe from the future, maybe, I mean, as far as three-dimensional time is concerned, there is no such thing. Well, besides what we've created, so are they actually trying to tell you that, okay, everything you see is impossible is not really impossible, introducing to you that nothing is impossible, and that is our future way of thinking, is that nothing is impossible any longer, otherwise we're doomed?
Well, I have a sort of I almost said rational, but let's say at least orderly kind of mind. So I tried to understand, what could this be? So you make a list of hypotheses and then think about each hypothesis and test it against the evidence. Okay, hypothesis 1, DMT is not a drug. It is an extraterrestrial communication device. These are creatures somewhere in the universe who are so different from us that they come to us not in starships the size of Manhattan, but in drug molecules that are dinky. So we are in contact here with some kind of extraterrestrial technology, and these are true aliens of some sort. And God knows the weirdness of the situation supports the hypothesis. Okay, second hypothesis. There is a parallel universe, unsuspected by most human beings. It's right here all the time. It's inhabited. These things have their own hopes, fears, problems, so forth. And somehow this drug just erases this boundary, and then you find yourself in the elf nest. Okay. Next hypothesis. These things, because they have great affection for me, because they seem intent on the task of communicating, perhaps they are human beings from the distant future. Perhaps this is what we are fated to become. You know, there's always, since we were kids, the cliche, beings of pure energy. Well, it's always been a little hard to wrap your mind around what that would look like, but lo and behold, here appear to be creatures of pure energy. But there are a lot of problems with hypothesizing a future human technological breakthrough which would allow them to actually manipulate the past. Logical paradoxes and that sort of thing. Well, so then here's another possibility. They are human beings, but they are not in the future in the ordinary sense or in the past. They are in the prenatal and post-life phase. In other words, these are either the unborn waiting in some limbo-like dimension to descend into matter, or they are in fact people who have had a sojourn in the domain of organic existence and now have moved on. Let me not kid you, we're talking about dead people here in that case. Well, if you go to the shamans who access these places through ayahuasca or the Varrola snuffs or something like that, they will say, well, these are ancestors. Didn't you read Merciliade? Don't you know that shamanism works through ancestor magic? Well, ancestor is a tremendously sanitized term for dead people. And if what is actually happening here is that the much argued about soul is actually made visible by this pharmacological strategy, I mean, God knows why, but God knows why anything else is the way it is, then this is truly big news. This is the confounding of rationalism. If what is happening is that by pushing the frontiers of pharmacology, we discover a way to even momentarily and temporarily erase the boundary between the living and the dead, then this is a 180-degree turn on the evolution of culture that not even the most technically infatuated among us are prepared to assimilate. I mean, it's no challenge on that scale of things to expect visitors from Zenebel Ganubi or Zeta Reticuli or some other distant piece of real estate, but to expect visitors from, beyond the grave, that's a little confounding. And over time, I've sort of come to incline to the idea that this is what is in fact going on. And the reason it's so hard to bring anything out of the DMT flash is because at the center of the flash, you find out something so unexpected, so appalling, and so existentially convincing in the moment of confronting it, that you simply immediately block it out and obliterate it. And then, and these things are very focused on getting you to do what they're doing. I mean, they say, You can do what we are doing. Do it. Do it. And what they want you to do is use your voice to make objects appear in visual space, as though language, admittedly the phenomenon with which we are involved in a way that no other animal species on this planet is, but that language, as practiced by human beings, is an incomplete enchantment, and that pushed to its limits, language becomes not something heard with the ears, but something seen with the eyes,